The 2024 presidential election is set to be really interesting, maybe the most in our history. There's a lot happening from Trump in court to Biden facing impeachment hearings and RFK Jr. trying hard to even get on the ballot. Today, let's go through each state to see what the polls say about who might win the presidency. But first, let's talk about whether RFK Jr. is a serious contender. He's got some good points, with high favorability ratings in recent polls. But remember, it's the Electoral College that decides, not just the popular vote. RFK does have a lot going for him, including the highest net favorability rating, scoring 8 points higher than Trump and 10 points higher than Biden, according to recent polls. Going state by state, we can get an idea of how the people will vote and see how big of a waves RFK Jr. may prove to be. Before we proceed, most of you guys are not subscribed, so please subscribe and help us get to 1K. Starting off with states not expected to be considered competitive this upcoming election, with each party expecting to win in the margin of 9% or more based on historical trends and modern polls. To the west, Trump and the Republican Party are expected to have no problem winning Idaho, Utah, Wyoming with a whopping 53%, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Alaska, and Louisiana. Nebraska is also expected to be an easy one for the GOP, but this is one of two states that are currently polling to be a split in their votes. Nebraska's 1st and 3rd districts are a sea of red surrounding the blue dot that is its 2nd district, Omaha, giving 4 of its 5 votes to Trump and 1 to Biden. In the east, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina are all expected to be easy points for the former president. All of these states are made for him, projected to vote for Trump in margins large enough to leave pretty much no room for Biden. Combined, this gives the Republican Party 125 votes right off the bat, leaving it needing 145 to win. Biden and the Democrats also have a collection of states that would shock everyone if there was any competition in favor of the opposing parties. In the West, Biden has a stronghold in California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Colorado. In the East, Illinois, New York, Vermont, D.C., New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland are safely in the hands of the Democratic Party. In this list, I will also include the states of New Mexico and Virginia, who both have a chance of being decided by less than 10 points this election, but they are highly unlikely to be contested by the Trump campaign. These 2 states were also won by Biden in the 2020 election, so the odds of either flipping to Republican are highly unlikely. Altogether, including Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which I already mentioned, Joe Biden has a pretty much guaranteed initial vote tally of 209, giving him a lead of 88 votes over Trump and leaving him 61 votes away from a 2nd term. But how does RFK Jr. fit into the polling for these states? And is he impacting the other 2 candidates? RFK Jr.'s efforts are seen through his impressive polling average, which can range from 11.7%, according to RCP polling average, to 7.7% according to the average from Decision Desk HQ/The Hell. These are numbers not seen for an independent since Ross Perot's shot at the Oval Office in the 90s. RFK Jr.'s achievement can also be seen on the ballot battlefield, reportedly already being eligible in 8 states. Those states being Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, and Utah, as well as petitioning campaigns in almost all of the remaining states. This is important to note because ballot access makes for breaks many who try to run outside of the 2 major parties, and it's hard to win an election if no one can vote for you. Despite this, however, it's too early to tell if he will be a major candidate or if he will fade into irrelevance like so many others that came before. With all these states accounted for, there are only 14 states are left up for grabs. Half of these states, however, lean towards one particular candidate, making it hard but not impossible to flip. But the states that have the lowest margins, and most certainly are Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. These are the most unpredictable, and they are truly toss-ups. Now let's look at the most recent polls. From each of the 14 states, we haven't accounted for yet to determine who's favorite to win now and see how much of an impact RFK Jr. is having. Before we go over those K battleground states, let's take a look to see where those other 7 are leaning. The 7 states are Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, Florida, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Maine. Texas, a state that Trump won by a substantial 9% in 2016, and then in 2020 dipped down to just 5%, is expected to do something that may be surprising to some. According to the most recent poll conducted by the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation, Trump is expected to win by 12%, with 46% in favor of Trump, 34% in favor of Biden, and 9% in Kennedy's favor. This reflects an interesting trend that is shown through similar polls in the state and around the country as a whole. But it's safe to say, as of right now, Texas is leaning Republican, giving Trump 40 more electoral college votes. Moving a little further north, Iowa is the next state we'll look at, a Trump state in the last two election cycles. Iowa currently doesn't have any polls that include RFK Jr., despite him already getting the required signatures to get on the ballot. The most recent polls, with just the two major party candidates, show another 9-point lead in favor of Trump, getting him 6 points closer to 270. Just north of Iowa is Minnesota, our next state, who in 2016 and 2020, Democrats want Minnesota's 10 electoral college votes. The most recent polling data with Kennedy dates back to November of last year, and it shows Biden leading Trump by the minuscule 0.4%, with Kennedy showing the impact of the 9% he got in this poll. More recent polls, which exclude Kennedy, show Biden leading 44% to 42%, adding 10 votes in favor of the Democratic Party, giving them 219 electoral votes. Going back south to the Sunshine State, Florida seems to have cemented its place as a Republican stronghold in recent years, shifting its former status as a swing state. The most recent polls show a huge Trump majority, with every poll averaging 10% or more. The latest poll shows Trump with 49.2%, with Biden following with 34.6%, and Kennedy getting 6.1%. It's safe to say that Florida's 30 electoral college votes are favored to go to Trump. Ohio, another state that can have a big impact, has voted Trump in the last two elections. Following this trend, recent polls reflect another huge margin in favor of Trump. However, interestingly, the polls fluctuate in what percentage Kennedy gets, with the most recent showing 4.6%, but the previous poll showing almost 3 times as much, with 13%. This is one of the states that RFK hasn't qualified for the ballot, which may factor into this fluctuation. However, as of right now, Trump leads with double digits in almost every poll, putting Ohio firmly in Republican hands. Moving further northeast, New Hampshire is the second to last leading state with a history of voting Democrat. Unfortunately, this is another state with no polling that involves Kennedy, despite him already qualifying for the ballot. Looking at more recent primary polls, however, Biden is leading Trump 52 to 45, giving the incumbent president a 7-point lead and securing him another 4 points. The last leading state before we get into the battleground states is Maine, the second state, expected to be split aside from Nebraska. The statewide polling data shows a huge majority in favor of Biden with an 8-point lead, according to 538, giving the Democratic Party another point. But it's important to mention the second district in Maine having a 20-point lead in favor of Trump, adding another point to his tally. With that, we wrap up and can look closer at the states that can radically change the outcome of the election. The battleground states. These are important to look at for 2 reasons, because they hold the power to effectively choose who wins, and because they will show how big of an impact the Kennedy campaign will have, and it will help determine the answer to the question of whether he's an actual contender or just a spoiler, like many skeptics are expecting. In the last election cycle, the swing states included the 5 that Trump won: Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. It also includes the 8 that Biden won: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, effectively winning him the election. This November, the states look more locked in, and leaving only 7 to swing either way. Moving from west to east, we start at the battleground states of Nevada. According to the most recent polls by the Wall Street Journal, we can see Trump is leading 37% to 33%, with Kennedy followed with his largest margin yet. 15% based on these polls, Nevada is leaning Republican, leaving Trump 1 point behind Biden with 225 compared to 226 electoral college votes. Just southeast of Nevada is Arizona, our second swing state. While voting Republican in 2016 and 2020, it flipped blue. Based on the most recent polls, however, it looks like Arizona is favoring Trump with a lead ranging from 3 all the way up to 8, with Kennedy averaging a turnout of an impressive 10%. With this data, currently Arizona is changing course to lean Republican, giving Trump 11 more points, putting him in the lead. Going back up north, our next state is Wisconsin, another state that in 2016 voted red, then in 2020 swapped to blue. Polls here are a lot closer, with Trump only leading with 1.6% based on 12 polls. Kennedy's average in this state is about 8.2%, showing the impact he is having on this intense state. While it's too close to tell right now, based on this data, there's a slight lead right, giving the Republicans 10 more votes. Just east is Michigan, with its 15 votes. This is another close state that switched in the last 2 election cycles. Trump is showing a slight lead over Biden, with an average of 2.6% based on 19 polls. This is another state that has Kennedy polling with 10.2%. This slight edge in favor of Republicans gave Trump 15 more votes, leaving him only 9 points away from 270. Our last 3 states are Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Biden would need all 3 to get ahead and ensure Trump doesn't get 270. Starting with Georgia, based on 17 polls, Trump is leading with 5%, 43.4%, compared to Biden's 38.4%. Kennedy is doing about his poll average at about 7.5%. This turns the state slightly red, putting Trump over the 270 mark. Moving to North Carolina, this seems to follow the red trend seen in other battleground states, with Trump again leading with 4.1% based on 17 polls. Kennedy also has a nice average of 9.1%, with a range of 12%, all the way down to 1.5%. This is also a state where he has already qualified for the ballot. And finally, Pennsylvania, the latest poll including Kennedy, shows Biden leading 3 points with 44%, compared to Trump's 41%, with Kennedy getting 7%. And in an interesting turn, 4% voted none of the above. Even with Pennsylvania, however, it's not enough for the Democratic Party to win, putting them at 245 compared to the Republicans' current projected votes of 293. It's clear that RFK Jr.'s presence is having an impact on the election, seemingly in favor of Trump, with many swing states showing signs of a Republican lean. With the 2024 presidential election map based on the most recent polls, the final votes show Joe Biden at 245, losing to Trump with 293. While we are still months away from November, a lot can happen, and there is still a lot of polling, campaigning, and of course, voting to do.